Hello, it's All Your Bass Chris here with another gear review video. This time we are talking about a Behringer XR12, which is the xair series small mixer. A little bit backstory. Back in 2012, Behringer decided to bring out a digital mixer, the X32. A lot of people wailed and gnashed their teeth, predicted it would be a flop because Behringer didn't have the best name when it came to a gear. That was very affordable, wasn't necessarily the best quality. It's quite subjective. The Behringer DIs for guitar players they're everywhere and they're practically indestructible. So they make good gear occasionally. Some gear's good, some gear's bad, same as most companies. So Behringer decided to bring out the X32, which was predicted to be a flop until everyone realised that Behringer had actually achieved what was thought to be impossible, which was to bring out a 32 channel theatre, live band, touring mixing desk with motorised faders and full DSP for under $3,000. In fact, you can buy them new now for about $1,500, so very, very competitively priced when you consider that a lot of the pro level mixing consoles of that type are about £16,000. So obviously, having a keen interest in gear, I always quite lusted after an X32. I did want one. I have played with one quite a few times. I've played with the Midas, the M32 as well, which is the same basic mixer with upgraded preamps and slightly different interface. So I like the X32. Now, Behringer followed up on the success of the X32 by bringing out some more models of the X32. They brought out the X32 Compact, which, as you'd imagine, is a slightly smaller version of the X32, same channel count, less faders on the machine itself. They then brought out the X32 Producer, which was the 19-inch rack version, again, less faders, but the same channel count. Then they brought out the X32 Rack, where instead of less faders, it had no faders, and was controlled entirely using an app or a PC, but still kept the analog input and output. And then finally the X32 Core, which did away entirely with the analog input and output and no faders and was a 1U rack unit. And each one was cheaper than the last. An X32 rack was still in the region of £1,000, and so it was a little bit beyond my budget. I don't mind spending £1,000 on speakers, but at that time I didn't have the resources to buy a £1,000 mixing desk. For a solo act, it's a bit of an overkill as well. So being a solo act, I don't need 32 channels, so I also don't need to carry a gigantic mixing console around with me. Then, a few years later, Behringer decided to release a budget-friendly model. It isn't the X32, but it does share a lot of the same elements of the X32. Has very similar preamps, which were designed by a company called Midas, which Behringer had bought recently, or Music Tribe, its parent company, had bought. So they brought out a small, the xair series of mixers, has less input and output. It has, again, no faders at all. It's all controlled with apps or with a PC. And the best thing about the xair, in my opinion, is it is very budget friendly. It's a lot cheaper. The model I have, the XR12, which is the smallest version, has, as it says, 12 inputs. And it retails at around £220, which is actually in the realm of impulse buy, I believe, and would make a good secondary mixer as a backup. So that's what I've bought. I'm going to show you a little bit around it now. Okay, so here's the mixer itself. There's very little on the sides or on the back, so we have IEC input and a ventilation fan on one side, ventilation on the other side. 4 Nutrix inputs with the gains are digital, and then we have our normal jack inputs, 2 auxiliary outs, a left and right mains input, headphone socket, and a volume control for the headphone. Ethernet jack for remote controlling or adding an external router. These controls, if you set an access point, this will it has a built-in wireless access point, which will create its own wireless network, which you can connect to with devices. Wi-Fi client will allow it to connect to an existing wireless network, and Ethernet allows you to connect it to an external router or directly to a PC. MIDI in, MIDI out for MIDI control of the mixer. A USB port for recording. It'll record a stereo mix or two channel, or it'll also play back WAV files in stereo. Not bad so far. Obviously an antenna. And that's pretty much it about the unit. The XR12 obviously is this size. You have the 16, which has more Nutrix connectors, and then you have the 18, which is the same sort of thing, but adds a couple of different, adds a couple of extra options. You get digital input and output with the USB, so it can act like a sound card, an 18-channel audio interface, in and out, and has digital in and out for snakes and stuff. So good stuff. So yeah, I mean it's very much, there's very little to it. It's made of metal. It has rubber bumpers on the side. It does come with a rack kit to allow you to mount it directly into a rack. And yeah, it's a very nifty little unit. It does obviously have the built-in power supply, so you can use an IEC, which in my opinion is a big step up from the QSC mixer, even though it's a few more quid. So there's very little to show here, so the next thing I'll be doing will be plugging it into the software and showing you that on my computer. I'd like to make a little note about the built-in Wi-Fi on the Behringer XR12. It's not brilliant. In fact, I would argue that it's borderline unusable. And as this is one of the only ways of communicating with the mixer, this is a big fault with the design. Now, the problem really lies that it outputs 2.4 gigahertz in the 2000 gigahertz Wi-Fi range, which is the same wavelength that most radio mics now use. In the house, you'll have no problem connecting to this. In a coffee shop, you'll probably be okay. But the moment you start getting to a venue with quite a lot of people in, then they've all got mobile phones all filling up that airspace. This struggles to connect. It's easily rectified though, as I bought an inexpensive travel router like this TP-Link, and you literally just plug that into the Ethernet cable, and then this will act like the wireless router, and this can be output in the 5 gigahertz range, which is slightly quieter, it's less congested, that spectrum, and I've had much better results using something like this.
Okay, here we are. This is the main xair software. There are different versions available for different devices, such as Android or iOS. You can run it on iPads. You can run the Android version on phones. There isn't an iOS phone version of the app yet, and I don't imagine there will be. But there is a third-party solution to that. But anyway, I digress. So, this is both the biggest strength and the biggest weakness of the xair series. It uses practically the same software as the X32. So if you're familiar with the X32, then this is absolutely fantastic. If you're not, well, this could look quite daunting. So, it is set up as a traditional mixer. Here we have our faders here. The faders are controllable with a mouse at this app, and you can use the scroll wheel to bring your faders up and down, if you like. Here we have like an overview of what's going on. There's your gain. That's how much is being sent to the bus. I'm going to explain why that's up in a minute. Here we have the different compressors, compressors, gates, and whatnot. EQ curves, and so on. So this is for an overview of what's happening. If we now go into channel mode, which is here, this is a further overview of what's happening. Again, it shows the gain here. Phantom power can be turned on and off. You can reverse the polarity of the signal. You can link channels, so 1 and 2 would be linked as a stereo pair there, affecting whatever you did with one would affect the other one, and there'd be panned hard left and hard right. Here we can insert effects straight into the effects bus. Mic gain, as we can see. Noise gate settings here with quick settings to access it. Equalizer with a quick setting access to the low cut. Compressor with a quick setting to the threshold. You can drill further in. Auxiliary bus send. I am sending this microphone to the bus because I am sending the output of my mixer from one of the monitor sends directly to my audio interface to record this video. So this would be set up as if you were sending to a monitor mixer. Sorry, not monitor mixer, a monitor speaker or in-ear monitor. These buses are disabled by default as they're not physically connected on the XR12. Effects sends. Using this you can bring the effects in or out, so you can send as much of the microphone signal to the effect as you want. La 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 la. Okay. Main out. You can disable the mic from the main mix entirely, which I'm going to do now, and that has no effect because I'm going out into a bus. Pan left or right. Auto mixing, which we'll get back to in a bit, DCA groups, which we'll talk about, and mute groups, which we'll talk about momentarily. But in the meantime, if we go to the input side, this is where you can change the physical connections of the mixer. So I at the moment have this microphone plugged into input 1 on the mixer, which is then brought to channel 1 on the software. You can completely uncouple all this and you can have input 1 go to any channel you want, or vice versa. You can even have input 1 going to multiple channels, although I don't know why you'd want to do that. Again, here we have access to the low cut on the mic, and again we have control of the channel insert. There's a lot of duplication here, so it's whatever your workflow is better with, you can find the way through. Here's the noise gate control. As you can see, it's very comprehensive on this mixer, with presets available. I mean 4 presets, but you know, it's a nice starting point. And here we have an expander as part of the gain. If I set that on at 2.1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1, we have the noise gate itself, which if I bring in, that should then suddenly start bringing the, if I turn it on rather, that should start ducking the signal. La 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 la. And then we have the ducker, which when I turned on instantly turned off the signal. A ducker is something you don't see very often in digital mixers at the moment. I don't know why they don't bother having one on, but it's a useful thing to have. With a ducker you can have this channel ducked when it hears another channel running. So the opposite side of that is if, well, let me show you. This will require some rewiring of the auxiliary, so I'll explain what I'm going to do as I do it. So this is the auxiliary channel. This allows you to play back from the USB port. So at the moment I have on the recorder, on the mixer here, one track saved here, and if I press play, it should start hearing the track play. And this is being routed to the auxiliary channel here. I'm going to turn that down a bit, but leave it running in the background. If I go to in and out, this is where you can route everything on the mixer. I'm now going to have my left and right channels sent to channel 13 and my USB channels rather sent to 13 and 14. If I bring auxiliaries down, and if I go into this channel and link them, it's a stereo pair. Right, so these are now channels 13 and 14. As you can see, when I move one fader up, the other one goes down. We're not hearing anything at the moment because we haven't got anything in the bus. So if I bring this up and say I'm sending that to the monitor mix, and now bring this up. Okay, so I'm now going to go into the gate here and I'm going to turn the ducker on. and I'm going to have the filter, which is going to be listening to channel 1. Now, what's going to happen here is when I go above the threshold of the ducker, and turn it on. I always forget to do that. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but every time I start talking, it mutes the channel with the music on. So, and then it brings it back in nice and subtly. And this all can be changed here. So if I change the attack time, it should sort of be more of a subtle. We'll bring that up a bit more. There we go. So when I start talking, it just brings the music down, and then when I stop talking, it brings it back in. So that's what you can do with the ducker, anyway. It's useful for quizzes, or if you're a compere or something. Now, because I've adjusted the ducker here, you can actually see a little representation of what's happening. When I start talking, the little red line drops down. That's showing gain reduction is taking place. Anyway, back to where we were. So we've done the gate. We're now on EQ. 4-band EQ here with a nice real-time analyzer, which will kick in any second. There we go. You can start seeing what's happening with your signal input, and you can change things as you want. At the moment, it's sounding a little bit bassy, so let's bring in a low cut here, and as I start bringing that across, you should be able to hear a little bit more clarity starting to pop into my voice, especially if I bring it up to about 150. There we go. Probably too much. I've made that a bit. I've took a lot of the energy out of that. So there we go. And you can see where the high point of the bass is here, and it's been ducked slightly. And let's see, we want to adjust a little bit of EQ here. Let's bring that one down. If we turn it up, you can hear it's quite boxy, so if I bring that down, and if we do the same here, bit of a boost here to make it more clarity, and then we can do a high cut here. So there you go. I mean, it is what it is, and you can turn that on and off as you like. I should point out when you turn the EQ off, it does leave the low cut on, which is quite nice, but something to be aware of. There's a separate button to turn off the low cut. So that's your EQ. I'm going to reset the EQ slightly there. There we go. There we go. That also saves the low cut. Compression settings. We have a compressor here. So if you bring the threshold down, you should start seeing some gain reduction coming in. So the louder I get, it starts squashing the sound a little bit. And a very, very comprehensive compressor on here. You can change lots of the settings. Also acts as an expander. Very, very nice indeed. And you can change the type of how sharp it cuts off the knee, how sharp it brings it in. And yet again, you can sidechain the compressor the same way as I did with the ducker, and you could have perhaps more compression the louder the track gets, which I don't know why you'd want that, but it can be done. And again, presets. I'm going to turn this preset on for a minute. Well, you'll see. Okay, so now we have the vocal compressor that's built in. It's quite aggressive, as you can hear, and it's brought in an extra 6 decibels of gain. If you think that sounds better, that's spot on. It's not something, I think 6 decibels is a little bit too much for me, but whatever. We'll leave that on for now. Here we get to the effects sends. This is where you can redirect everything to everywhere, but working on the channel here. So at the moment, we have everything here being sent post-fader to bus 1. That's why I can adjust the main fader and have it duplicated out the bus. Bus 2 is everything post-EQ, so that ignores the faders altogether, but still applies processing and whatnot. Here we can adjust the mix we send to the bus. 1 and 2, buses 3 to 6 are disabled. They are available, but they're not physically available, so you can make as many buses as you want and perhaps then send bus 3 out to a different output. But they're not available physically on the 12. The 16 and the 8 have more auxiliaries out. The 16 and the 18, sorry. Here we are, effects again. You can have them directly applied to the input, or go pre-EQ, post-EQ, pre-fader, or post-fader here. Just to show what you can do here, if I bring the effects in, I can add effects in on this sort of screen here. Sounding a bit wet for my taste there, but we'll take that out. Okay, back to main. Again, duplicating some functionality, but in a good way. We have output. You can disable this output from outputting on the left and right by turning that on and off, or you can pan hard left or hard right. We have DCA groups available here. A DCA group is a way of grouping a multiple amount of channels and assigning them to one fader, and it keeps the relationship between the faders the same. So if, for example, we had these faders here, say that's your saxophone 1, saxophone 2 and a trumpet, and you wanted to bring all three down at once, but you didn't want to change the mix of the three instruments, then you'd use a DCA group, and that would bring them down in sort of relationship to each other. Very useful. Mute groups, a way of muting lots of channels all at once. So again, if you wanted then to turn all the brass section off, you could have them assigned to a mute group, press the button, and it would mute all of those. Here we are in the effects channel. Lots of fun here. There's a lot to get through here. I'm not going to get into it too much. Suffice to say that these are all of the effects available on each bus. Most of these reverbs and delays are emulations of classical rack gear from back in the day. And there are plug-in EQs as well as compressors, which are, again, emulations of different racks. Because each channel has their own compression and EQ and everything, but if you want that different feel, or you used gear back in the day that you really liked, a lot of it will be here. Just for a bit of a giggle, I'm going to show you something clever. So here's the stereo combinator. This is something you wouldn't expect to see on a mixer of this price point. So a stereo combinator is basically their name for a multi-band compressor. So I'm going to use this on 13 and 14, which, if you remember, are my music channels. And while I've got this up, let's remember to turn that gate off, because we don't want that in. So that's off now. So if we bring up the stereo combinator again, I'm going to pin it, and I'm going to press play. And then I'm going to insert it. Spectrum balance control, which can get you into a lot of trouble. So I'm now going to bring the threshold down, and if you look, it's now trying to balance the individual channels. If I bypass it, this that the stereo combinator really could do with a whole video all to itself, and there are some great tutorials out there. I'm not going to get too in depth in that at the moment. So we have 4 effects units here, essentially. They can be assigned to any channel can be assigned to them either as a send, or if you want to lock it off as an insert, such as I've done here, that can be done as well. The stereo combinator takes 2 inputs. A lot of these do take 2 inputs, so you can, in theory, well, if you wanted to use, say, an EQ, well, let me demonstrate something here. So, now say, for example, I want a de-esser here. You want that as an insert, so you now want it de-essing. So I've put channel 1 on and insert that. Now we've got the de-esser running on this channel, and if I bring that up, it should start. You should be able to hear it starting to take those out. Okay. Now we're only using half of this at the moment. This that's really aggressive. I don't like that at all. This. So now if I had another microphone on channel 2, I could then assign it to that channel. And channel 2 now is being inserted into this side of the... I'm going to have to turn it off. It's starting to get my head in. That then gets inserted onto channel 2. This way, you can, even though you're using an insert and you're basically tying up this FX bus, you can send 2 different inputs to it. So in theory, you could DS 8 different different inputs there. Or if you wanted to use it as a send, you could send everything to it, but it wouldn't be as effective, I don't believe. So just as a bit of an example, I'm now going to... Again, I'm going to go to FX bus 2 down here, and I'm going to bring this mic in so we can hear a bit more of the reverb. So that's quite a nice reverb, I think. And if you click into it, here we have some more settings you can drill down into, and 2 pages worth of it. So if I bring the pre-delay up a little bit, bring the size up, decay, let's make it really big. No one can understand why you'd use a reverb like this. Okay, that's enough of that. Right, so, yeah, and the reverbs are of a nice quality, as are the delays and the other bits and pieces on here. So, yeah, so far so good. We've spoken a bit about the EQs, back to the main left and right. If we now move on to metering, this is where you can see an overall overview of your desk. You can see what's going where. Obviously, you can see now as I talk, we've got analog input 1 there. It's got something coming in, which is then being sent outwards to bus 1. Monitor and solo and the main are the same signal because I've made it so. There is one, if I go into my left and right channel here, there's a little bit more we can see. Now the left and right channels on, this is your main output from your mixer, has more EQ on it, and you can see that in different types of EQ. So this does the same thing as the other one, but it's a different way of looking at it. This way, it's a good way of identifying feedback. So if you've got like a particular sustained note that's feeding back, like feedback looks like a bit of a whistle. So if I whistle a little bit, we can see that that's the frequency that's being a bit naughty. So I could go and take it out. So very useful. That's the way of doing it. That way if you want it. Yeah. And there are compressors available for your masters as well. But you can also send your masters directly to an insert. So if instead of using the main track as your left and right, you decided you want to slap a stereo combinator on your entire mix, you can do that as well, and that's something that's available, although you wouldn't want to do that too much. Let's put it through a nice compressor instead. Oh yeah, with a working VU meter, baby, got to be done. So that's the main overview. While we're talking about this, obviously we'll get back to routing. You can route everything to anywhere. This is another way of routing stuff. This is where you send your auxiliaries and you say where they are and what they're doing. Now, interestingly enough, auxiliary 1 and auxiliary 2 are both set to post fader, so I'm guessing that's left and right. And you can say what's being monitored from your mix. You can have a main monitor from your headphones, can be the monitor mix, or you can listen to the main left and right through the headphones. I'd also like to point out here, you can save patches to your PC. If you've got something that you want to recall, like if you've done some interesting patching, you can save that, and that's how you load the preset. And you can also miss out things as you load them. We'll bring up setup again. So the mixer here, as we know, is a Wi-Fi mixer, so you need to be able to connect to it. My mixer is currently connected to my home wireless network and has been given a IP address from the router at home. You can set the settings for when it's being used as a wireless access point on its own. That's my wireless network it's connected to. I put the information in. Will only connect to 2.5 gigahertz Wi-Fi networks at the moment. Well, ever. And you can see the information if you're connected via LAN. Now, you can directly connect a PC to the mixer and have a hardwire connection if you want. Audio and MIDI, change the clock rate of the mixer. Safe levels, that's actually quite a useful thing to have if you're doing different venues. If you're forgetful and you sometimes forget to, if you'll turn your mixer on, then turn your speakers straight on afterwards without looking at what you're doing, you could sometimes have like a very hot channel suddenly turn on and not notice that. So that'll mute your outputs. So that'll turn all the buses off and your left and right and mute them. Link your preferences, so preamps, EQs, dynamics and fader mutes are all linked. Different ways of muting the system. You can have a hard mute, which versus soft mute, DCA groups, channel on, but I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure what some of these do. USB interface only works on the XR18, which has a USB interface built in. MIDI config, you can control the mixer using MIDI. So that's something quite good, and you can do quite a lot of the functionality with it. You can, in theory, connect a MIDI foot pedal and trigger different scenes and stuff. These are where your monitor sources happen. These are all things you'd want to adjust for sending to your monitors or your headphones. Left and right after fader level, buses, you can send whatever you want. GUI preferences. This is talking about the app itself. Utility. You can have little windows which you can scatter around your desktop doing different things. A good one here is user. Now, user are custom faders. So you don't have to have this entire screen up. You could have a desktop with a couple of faders on one window, or even more useful, you can have the full RTA. If you've got a multi-window setup, you could drag this to another window and look left and right, and you wouldn't have to change different windows. Save, load, copy and paste. Fairly self-explanatory. Save saves stuff either as a scene, which is a complete snapshot of the mixer as it is, or channel preset, where you save like an individual channel. Saving as a scene would be useful if you've already done a sound check for a full band and you want to recall that. Channel preset would be useful if you've got perhaps a compare who you want to insert into every single scene without having to redo it all the time. Load obviously loads those scenes. Copy and paste allows you to duplicate one channel to another or whatever. So if I go to this channel link and hit copy, and then I go to channel 2 and hit paste, it'll say, what do you want to paste? And I'll be like, everything, but apart from the input. No, let's do everything. Why not? Paste. Now, if I go to input, it's even copied the mic gain across, I believe. No, it hasn't done the mic gain, no. So it doesn't do that, but there we are. And I've duplicated the mic input too. Snapshot, boom, saves. This saves it to the mixer itself rather than the PC. These save to PC, that saves to the mixer, which means that you can save a snapshot and recall it using the app if you don't have your PC with you. Recorder allows you to record your left and right output, or you can have different tap points here, and also allows you to play things back using this lovely little skeuomorphic thing here. I actually use this to play backing tracks because it accepts folders, so you can have different folders with different set lists in. It will, however, only accept WAV files, and it'll only accept 16-bit WAV files recorded at the same clock as the mixer. So in this case, you'd have to have a 16-bit WAV file recorded at 48.1, and in which case it would then play. Auto mix. Right, we'll talk auto mix because this might be something you'd be interested in buying this mixer for because it's so cheap. If you're doing talking head applications or conferences and you have multiple people all on stage with live mics, you can go into the individual mics here. So if I go into channel 1, main, you can assign this microphone to say mix X. And if we go to microphone 2, assign that to mix X, 3, mix X, and 4, mix X. Now, at the moment, these are all weighted the same. So you don't have one mic overriding the others. And now if you select auto mix, you can see that because I'm talking into this microphone, it's muted the other three because there's nothing coming in. But if I assign some weight to the mixer, if I bring the weight of it down a little bit, turn it right down, and I stop talking, watch what happens to... Now, what we're seeing here is my microphone being turned down and microphone 2 being turned up because there is a little bit. If I introduce some gain into that channel, like turn up, so we've got the noise floor kicking in, it's muted that channel. But it's muted my channel because it's hearing the hiss that I've put in on the channel 2, and it's thinking that somebody's talking. So as soon as I stop talking, it bring that mic up. But because I have a higher weighting on my channel, sorry, a lower weighting I should say, it doesn't override it. So I'm louder than they are, so it's turning that microphone down. But if I turn this up, it'll totally override them no matter what I do. As you can see, that microphone's not really coming in. So this is a good way of, if you've got, say, 4 people or more with lavalier mics on stage, it's a good way of keeping like mixes under control. So I'm going to turn it off now because I don't like it. And I need to turn that preamp down. There we go. Preamps are a little bit noisy on this mixer. They're Midas built, but I mean, bear in mind this is a budget mixer, so I think it's acceptable. And this is obviously a quick way of turning off the auto mix. So if I say that as active, then I should be able to, there we go, add as many as you want to. Nice, and it'll work. Very nifty. And it was a nice unexpected addition to the mixer because that wasn't released when it came out. It was added in a firmware update, and nobody expected the cheap one to get it, and it did. So yeah, that's pretty much a bit of a summary of everything here. That's the complete overview of what we've got. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit go and load this scene. Now this scene is my scene, but it's set for a different microphone. But if I hit go now, then this will bring in all of my settings. And it's like, you sure? Yes. Right. So now we have a totally different setup. There we go, I'll turn it off. Right. So I'll just talk you through my settings here. This is my microphone channel. And there's a lot of stuff turned on here. So there's my equalizer with compressor. The compressor is quite aggressive. I have my auxiliary set to duplicate the master bus, so you're hearing exactly what I'd be sending to the left and right. EQ, this is for a different microphone, so this one isn't perfect, but it does still help with my voice there. There's my send settings. Effects, I use a rich reverb and a hall reverb, stereo delay and stereo combinator. The combinator is inserted into my music channel, which for me is 9 and 10. Something else I've done is I have changed the scribble strips to reflect what's on what. So this is something I've set up. Oh, excuse me. That's helpful. This is something I've set up myself. As you can hear, we've got effects coming in. Now if I go into noise gate and turn it on, the effects have now been bypassed. So what's happening here, if we go into the gate, is this is listening to channel 9. As soon as channel 9 kicks in, it turns the effects on. So it's listening for backing tracks playing, and then it'll unmute this channel. And what this channel is a duplicate of channel 1. So it's the same settings, same EQ, same everything, duplicated onto this channel, but this channel is the one with the sends on, while my mic channel it's completely dry. So doing this, it allows me to have some sort of a little bit of automation when I'm on stage, so I don't have to fiddle with muting my effects to talk in between songs. When the song stops, the effects turn off. So that's something that you can't do on most of the digital mixers out there. The routing options on a lot of mixers are different. As an example, I have used recently an M18, which is the RCF mixer, and the M20. The M18 has practically no routing at all and has very limited effects, but it's still a very nice mixer and sounds very good, and is very, very good for the kind of person who wants to pick up something, turn it on, press a few buttons and get going. Then you've got the QSC Touch Mix, which I also own, and that doesn't have routing like this at all. The effects on it are good, nice preamps, but what the QSC Touch Mix is good at is the wizards, which will allow you to basically set your mixer up, even if you're not too sure how to use a digital mixer. It'll hold your hand through it, which this won't do. Oh, also mute groups. Now, if you can see, effects 1, effects 2 and effects 3 are assigned to different mute groups. So if I press that, mute group 1 mutes all 3 of those. So that's just a quick demonstration of what mute groups do as well. Yeah, so that's pretty much it, really. I hope this is illuminating, and I hope you found it useful. I'm going to disappear now, and thanks very much indeed. Take care.